Welcome everyone back to episode 2 of the Victor One podcast. This week's emphasis will be everything related to flying, everything with GA, airline and flying, and questions that you may have that you want answered. This week's special guests, we have 3 alumni from 2019, Clement Wu, Jye Highfield, Hammon, and also a very special guest as well, a current Qantas 737-800 captain, flying the likes of the 767 and also 747-400 for Qantas. I'd also like to give special thanks to Brendan and Jye, who are making this call from all the way up north. So appreciate that as well. I'd also like to welcome my co-host for today, Calvin. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm back. I'm very well. Still in isolation, but just making time go faster.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty. So I think we should just get the ball rolling. Just enlighten the viewers on, I'd say, I know your journey so far into aviation and what and how you got into it, I suppose, and what you're doing now.
Yeah, I'm Clem. Started with a real passion for aviation ever since I was young. So having the opportunity to jump right into it out of high school, I just took it and went straight for it. Did the graduate diploma of flying at the university, which is coupled by default with the aviation management stream, although it's not limited to that. And I graduated at the end of 2019, so a couple months ago. In the past, I've had a short opportunity at Keelink for just under a year. Pre-COVID, I was a 737 simulator instructor at Flight Experience Sydney, and now I'm just doing little things during COVID just to pass time.
Awesome. And obviously that thing with Keelink was part of the management side in terms of just in the office there at the Qantas jet base.
Yeah, that's correct. So I was in the Qantas office at Mascot. It was a management role, but it wasn't limited to management students only.
Awesome. All right. I think a good path to go from there would be to go to Jye and Brendan, considering you're both alumni from last year as well. So what have you guys been up to?
Yeah, righto. I'll just do the same as Clem, give a little intro. Yeah, so my name's Brendan Hammon. I graduated from the Bachelor of Aviation Flying in 2019, so last year. Basically, since then, I have moved up north. February of this year, I moved to Darwin. In Darwin, I did a course called the GA Ready course through a company called Flight Standards. Pretty much that just gives you a really general but detailed overview about what to expect in GA. So you do 5 hours ICAS in a Cessna 210. You do a lot of pilot maintenance stuff with the maintenance mamies up there, and then you do a flyaway as well throughout all of the NT.
You're awesome. And that's obviously something you did there as well. And did that leave you obtaining a job straight away from that as well, that GA course? Or was that something that you did more so as a prep thing to get you ready for it?
Yeah, GA really sort of tickled my fancy, I guess. And it was a good opportunity to get a lot of operators up here require you to have 200 series time in Cessna aircraft, just because that's the predominant aircraft that they fly up here. I'm sure Jye will tell you the exact same. But yeah, pretty much it was a good opportunity to just get a real insight into what to expect, and then from there see if I wanted to continue with it or maybe come back home and do something else like an instructor rating. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I liked it. And then through that course, I was then offered a job with a company called Marthankul Yongle Air, which is where I'm working now. So we're based out of Elcho Island in the Northern Territory, and I'm currently line checked to fly the Cessna 210 out of Elcho Island, which has been great. Sort of pre-COVID, I guess, I was working during uni. I worked at a bar for 3 years, and then, went straight from that into this job, which has been good. Despite all the COVID stuff that's been going on, we've still been quite consistent with our work, which has been really good. We can do anywhere from maybe 10 to 25 hours per week, which is good, It's a really good experience up here. It's a very dynamic environment, particularly in the wet season, which is just passed. But, it's a really, really good industry, GA, especially up north. And I'd highly encourage anyone that wants to do it to definitely give it a go.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it sounds like already you've gained a lot of things that in your short time there, that you've gotten all this wealth of experience so far that you wouldn't have got otherwise if you did the flight instructor rating or what you've done at uni so far. So that sounds invaluable and awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
And also like Jye as well. I know you're doing JEA as well, but you took a different approach in terms of like a traditional, let's say, door-to-door approach, going through different operators, trying to find a job that way.
Yeah, that's right. So my name's Jye Highfield. I also graduated alongside Brendan doing the Bachelor of Aviation Flying, obviously the university. So yeah, pretty much in February, I moved up here alongside another graduate from the course, Alex Gardner. Yeah, I did move to Darwin and bought a car, and then pretty much started the door knocking process. I tried all the companies in Darwin, and then we decided to do a bit of a road trip down from Darwin into through Jabiru, tried a few companies there, then from Jabiru down to Katherine. In Katherine, drove all the way across into Western Australia, into a town called Kununurra, which I am currently residing in. Door knocked at Shoal Air. That's where I currently work now. I was lucky enough one day, me and Alex drove up to the airport, and literally it was just a matter of scissors, paper, rock of who was going to try at what company. I won scissors, paper, rock, and I went into Shoal at 9 o'clock in the morning, handed my resume in to the chief pilot, and I walked out at 4 o'clock that afternoon, completing a interview, a like kind of questionnaire, war questionnaire type of thing, and completed a check ride. So yeah, I did take that more, I guess, traditional route that everyone does when they come up here, door knocking, hanging around, and really just spending each day trying different companies. So yeah, now I'm currently employed as a line pilot for Shoal Air out of Kununurra, and I fly a variety of Cessna aircraft. I fly the Cessna 210, the Cessna 207, and the Cessna 205 aircraft. And yeah, I've been now in Kununurra working for them for approximately 2 months. But yeah, I guess pre-COVID, it's been a great business. We do a lot of charter flying to a lot of the remote Indigenous communities, and doing a lot of freight as well around the Kimberley. So it's quite an expensive area. And they really do rely on us. Coming into the dry season, which we're in now, it would now be peak tourist time. We'd also be doing a lot of scenic flights around the Bunga Bungles, up and around the Kimberley coastline and that. But obviously now that's not happening due to coronavirus. But that's the company's still going along. We're doing now about reduced operations. We've only got a handful of pilots that are remaining on, so I'm extremely lucky in that aspect to be kept on. But we're just doing now. My flying did go from flying every day. It's gone down to maybe once or twice a week. But yeah, I'm still stoked. Still got my foot in the door, and still hanging on for dear life.
Yeah, and the fact that you're still flying as well must be just an absolute treasure at the moment as well, considering that so many others aren't in that position. So yeah, no, that's awesome that you're able to do that. And I suppose like one of the main things you're saying there is just being able to, I suppose you must get so much like gratification from being able to connect those communities and being such an important part of those communities up there. I'm sure it makes it all worthwhile as well.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun up here. As Brendan said, the flying is very different each day. You'll go from Kununurra, which is one of the main towns of the Kimberley, to then out in Columbaroo, for example. They rely heavily upon us, and we take anything from freight runs. We provide them all the food, to taking equipment out for the local police, to doing to plumbers, to builders. So it's quite a array. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. Every day is different, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, exactly. Just keeping your toes. Something's different every day. It's just something that I suppose makes it so addictive, is just not knowing what's going to come next and doing and just hearing. Yeah,
absolutely.
Different. No, that's awesome, John. And also finally, Stu as well, who's obviously had a far more. His career's gone over many years now. Has campaigned in many respects as well. I suppose, Stu, how have you got not only to where you are today, but what are the things that you've thoroughly enjoyed along the way as well, or that these guys here will experience in the future, and gives them something to obviously look forward to as well. So yeah, how did you get to where you were, Stu?
No worries. I've got 37 years to cover, so I'll try and keep it brief. Guys, I went straight from school into flying. Like all of you fellas, I think I had a passion for it. So I actually went to fly at Cessna, an academy up there, similar to what you guys are doing out of Bankstown. My first job was Coolangatta, which is a pretty cool place to start, just instructing VFR charter. Ended up back at Cessna, where I learned to fly as an instructor for a couple of years. That's into the mid-80s. 82 I started, I should have said. We're in the mid-80s now. I got a job flying bank freight out of Brisbane in Barons and Part Navies and Senecas. Did that for a couple of years. Went to Flight West Airlines, which are now no longer. I was a captain on a King Air and a Banderanti. That took us into the late 80s. In 1990, I followed a bit of a dream and actually found myself in Europe. I just scored a job up there, initially on a Banderanti, which I flew already in Australia. I flew the Bandit out of Dublin in Ireland for about 3 months. The Irish economy was just winding up at that point, getting better, and I ended up on an F-27 in the left-hand seat pretty quickly. Did that for a couple of years. That was flying night freight for UPS and DHL primarily. Went to a Lockheed Electra, which is a 4-engine turboprop built in the late 50s. It's a 116,000-pound aeroplane. That was probably the most enjoyable flying that I did, the most interesting. All back of the clock night freight, but based out of Brussels with DHL flying all over Western Europe. I did that for about 20 months and then ended up with the Virgin franchise as a captain on a BA-146, flying to London City Airport mostly, which is a kind of a cool spot that has a 5.5 degree glide slope ILS onto a 1200 metre runway. That was challenging flying, particularly in the middle of winter. Did that for 3 years. That took me to 1997, and that's when I got the job back in Australia with Qantas. That's actually what brought me home. 3 years as a second officer on the 767 to start. The first FO slot was on the 767, so I checked out during the Olympics of 2000 as an FO. Did it for 8 years and then moved to the Jumbo in 2008 as an FO. I sat there for 10 years. That's everything stopped, which has relevance to today for us. Everything stopped in 2008 with the GFC. So I sat in the Jumbo for 10 years and then in about just under 2 years ago came to the 737 for command, which is where I am now, Sydney based, which I think I've met a few of you guys already. Now, coming into the COVID environment now, on the 737 for us personally, and I'll expand on this more for you guys later in implications, but the 737, as you probably know, is still flying, but only about 5% of its original schedule. At least it's something, because our long-haul colleagues aren't flying at all, the 4-engine guys anyway. So I was stood down in April for a month. I'm currently on roster for 4 weeks. Not a great deal of flying, just a couple of flights. I expect to be stood down again for June, and then beyond that, who knows? We can probably talk about a bit later in the podcast as to what the future holds. Yeah, there's my 35 years of experience, 23,000 hours in total.
Far out. That is wealth of experience there. That's for sure. And in terms of, I suppose, my segue from that is giving your experience, I suppose, in a variety of not only just flying aircraft types, but in terms of flying in Australia and Europe. And then obviously being involved in airline flying through many other things that have halted the industry in the past, namely the GFC 9/11. Obviously, you talked about that 10-year gap on which you're on the 400 as well. What are your thoughts, and what are any, I suppose, pieces of advice or recommendations you can give Clem, Brendan, Jye, and then also the viewers here who are also thinking about getting into aviation or in aviation at the moment, but are still doing their training as well? What are some of your thoughts of what you think will happen, and what are any pieces of advice you'd give to those people as well?
It's a really good question, Jack. It's a really hard one to answer, though, because there's so many variables that are yet to be determined. What I would say, though, is that we have seen all this before, although this is the worst that I've ever seen in my 35 years in the business. Sorry, 37 years. But, it will come back. The demand for flying nationally and globally will continue to be there. People still want to meet up for business and family and travel. So it will come back. It's just a matter of when. So hang on to your passion, guys. Like I said, we've all been through it. This will be a bit of a longer stop to everything, but it'll come back. I'm quite confident of that. Specifically, and we talked about the variables that we don't know about. So in terms of Australia, obviously you've seen that the numbers are pretty good in terms of the spread of the virus. And the domestic and combined with that probably trans-Tasman flying is going to resume within a few months. Now, how quickly the demand comes back to what it was before is hard to say. For us specifically in Qantas, I think it'll be balanced out a bit by the problems that Virgin is facing. I think they will probably re-emerge, but in a smaller form than they were prior to the COVID crisis. But again, who knows what the numbers will be there. But as I say, for us, particularly as Qantas pilots, we will probably come back to normal domestically, I would expect in a few months. Now, for you guys coming into it and waiting to move up the ladder, there are a few points here to make. Obviously, it's not good. It's, the people are going to be retiring and being made redundant, certainly within Virgin. And that's just putting guys out in the market, which will be snapping up whatever airline jobs that will be going. That's the bad side of things. On the positive side, look, within Qantas, we do have quite literally hundreds of guys hitting 65 in the next couple of years, which is going to soak up some of that excess of pilots that the country is going to be experiencing over the next couple of years. I can't give you specifics on that. It's a bit uncertain of I can't tell you where everyone is, of course. But I think like the 747 probably won't fly again unless there's a rapid resurgence in international demand, which I don't think there will be. But they were slated for retirement anyway at the end of this year. So that's not a great impact because they were going anyway. The big problem is with the 380 guys, bearing in mind that they're the most senior in the company. And the hot rumor is that probably only 6 of the 12 aeroplanes will come back, which means they'll need to find jobs for half the 380 guys within the system. Now, some of those will go. Like a lot of those captains I mentioned before that are hitting 65, NFOs for that matter. If they're 64, they'll probably just say, well, I'll go. I'll just take the superannuation and give it away. I would think there will be scores of guys in that format, in that area. Now, where the other guys go, they would get what we call RIND. It's a reduction in numbers process where they get put on to different, more junior types. In this case, it'll be the 330 and the 787. Now, this is one of the great variables. There is quite a possible scenario which says that Qantas will actually grow out of this in terms of its twin-engine long-haul flying. South African Airlines is bankrupt. Mauritian Airlines is bankrupt. Virgin we know about. Their international long-haul operation, the 777 and 330s will most likely not continue. So there is some positives there for Qantas that we will probably pick up some of that demand due to the failure of those less strong companies. So, there could well be spaces for the guys that come off the 380 and the 747 onto the twin engine long-haul fleet. Now, how quickly that happens is anybody's guess, as you guys know. But that's kind of where I see it going. It will come back, guys. It's just a matter of when. Whether it's 12 months or 2 years, that's you guys know about it as much as I do on that. It just really depends on international demand.
Because we received a lot of questions from people who are obviously in a position now where they're like you said, going into the industry or just like finishing. Even people in my year at the moment who are deliberating what they should do, and obviously the opportunity, seeing some of these opportunities go away can be slightly disheartening. So obviously there are other avenues you can take as well into getting into flying as well. And obviously by that time, from what you were saying, Stu, there should be all those captains retiring and there should be slots in the time for the industry to cover. But in the meantime, I suppose, bring this now to Clem, Brendan and Jye, there are many, I suppose, misconceptions, post-flight training, I suppose, in terms of, and obviously you could be very fortunate to get a job straight into an airline, but that's unlikely as well. There are obviously 2 main routes you can go to. That's obviously GA and then getting a flight instructor rating. And I suppose the questions that I'll put to, this applies to Clem as well, is the one you didn't do an instructor rating.
So I graduated with, I tried to have an open mind. I did have a preference for the airline route that the opportunity came from the QPB partnership, because in my eyes, getting into the right seat of a Dash 8 at 200 or so hours is like a golden ticket, especially in this time. So that, I guess, was priority 1, but I did try my best to make small assurances just in case that plan didn't work out. So I did consider an instructor rating. I went around to the schools around Sydney, and I guess just the whole East Coast in terms of instructor ratings based on pricing and what they offered. Some of these prices range from like low 20K to some insane amounts of mid 35K just for an instructor rating. So there's huge variables there. And that was my first preference because I'm a city boy at heart, I guess. So I'd prefer to stay in a city, but an instructor rating isn't more than a couple of months at most. So I was willing to go somewhere further away from the city. And in my eyes, an instructor rating would really further my knowledge as a pilot, and it would make me better as a pilot. Because stepping straight out of uni, and you do have the licenses of the CPL and Mecca, but I truly felt that I didn't really understand everything I had learnt, and the instructor rating would refine that. I also considered GA because having that investment of about $27,000 into an instructor rating isn't, it's not a small deal. Whereas when you jump straight into the GA, all you really need is spend some time getting back into the plane, getting your skills refined, maybe getting checked out in a couple of aircraft like that you haven't flown before, particularly in the Cessna fleet. So in terms of financial entrance, it's a lot cheaper. I looked particularly in the southwest of WA, and I guess I was offered like word of mouth jobs there, but that was a good little safety net. But once coronavirus came, because of the huge decrease in the tourism market, particularly because all these, you guys can answer for this as well, because a lot of them come from Asia, particularly China. Once that coronavirus hit, they just lost all their traffic and companies started shutting down and operations just came to a grinding halt. So that offer kind of went straight out the window. So yeah, I guess the preference for me was Keeling just because of what a good deal it is with our limited experience. But I then, as a second preference, I would have gone for the instructor rating just because of how it would have made me a better pilot.
Yeah, no, totally. And I suppose it's just finding at the end of your degree, or those guys who are just doing their flight training in general, there's no defined answer to what you should do. It's just what you want to gain most. If you want to refine those, like you said, Clem made a very good point, just refining those skills through an instructor rating. But in terms of the GA route, what beyond the opportunities of the QFPP, what took you to that GA route, Brendan and Jye? What are one of the main things that attracted you to that? And what is, I suppose, there are many misconceptions out there about what GA is like. What are some of the things that you've experienced so far that make it a very, very viable option, I suppose?
Yeah, I'll just touch on what Clem was saying. At least me coming to do GA was primarily financially influenced. Yeah, flight instructor ratings aren't cheap. If you can do one, it's a really good option. I would have loved to have done one, and maybe even can consider doing it later down the track. But at the time, I just didn't have the money to afford it. So pretty much worked full time for 2 months at the bar I was working at, saved up a bit of money, enough to pretty much get a plane ticket to Darwin, pay for my course, and a few months rent up there. So it was a lot cheaper for me to sort of choose to do the J option. So I took that on board. It's definitely a gamble, particularly the way the GA industry sort of sources its pilots, particularly for your first job. It's very much, as Jye can tell you, as to how he got his job, you have to be sort of there on the right day at the right time. Because you could have a pilot get fired or someone leave, and if you walk in that day and they're happy with you, they'll generally hire you. So, I mean, I was very lucky to get the job that I got when I did. So, definitely consider it if you want to do GA. It's something that I always wanted to do, and I'm glad that I did it because, like I said, it's always dynamic. In the space that I've been checked up here, I've had 2 alternator failures. I've had 2 gear malfunctions. I've done 2 gear down ferries to Darwin from Elko. But just talking about the misconceptions on that side of thing. It is hard work. It's a lot of the time you're not just flying, you're also in the office, doing bookings, doing quotes. At least for my job, we actually run the airport out at Elko Island. So we mow the lawns, we have rental cars that we need to wash and give out to people. So yeah, it's a part of the job, but you just have to do it. But yeah, it's a really, really exciting job, and yeah, I love it. So yeah, I guess that's it really.
No, that's a really good answer. I suppose, yeah. I mean, like you said, I suppose when you're in GA, a lot of the things I suppose you took for granted in your flight training and whatnot, everything being done for you, in terms of that is all now the onus on you as a pilot. You working for the company, I suppose you're responsible for many of the things that would otherwise be done for you in an airline or something like that. And I suppose and this can link into Jye's answer as well. How do you find, obviously you do, this is obviously something you love, but how do you find moving away from home and doing that at the same time? Obviously this is something that is new for you as well. How do you find that aspect of being away from friends and family?
Oh no, so like, I love it. No, honestly, like I love it. I love it up here. It's so much fun. It's I wasn't sure how I was going to go up here, but it's just it's so much fun. Particularly Kununurra. Kununurra is a small town, so at least it's only about 3,000 to 4,000 people here within the town. But I guess it's just, as Brendan was saying, you have to be prepared to do the hard work. That's probably the answer I can give. It's just you have to be prepared to dig in. And there's times when I was looking for work and looking for my job and for jobs, and it was rejection after rejection from different companies that they weren't hiring. You just have to stay persistent and show them enthusiasm and how keen you are, and that will go a long way within the industry. Because they don't say, they will see that you show up every couple of weeks with your resume still looking for a job, and the fact that you're still there, they get, because that's the thing, there's a lot of people that come up here and they'll give it one shot. They'll do the rounds once in Darwin. They might come through Kununurra once again. But if you say station yourself in Kununurra, for example, and you try the operators every week or so, getting your face known, it does not go unnoticed. And they'll pick you 100 times over from that one person that comes through once. He may have a more impressive resume. He may have more flight hours. But the fact that you're come through and showing dedication, it's more about showing, I guess, your personality as well. Because that's another point, is that they don't employ you on, yes, you might have low hours, but they don't employ you purely on your flying. They employ you on your personality and your fit into the culture. And I think that's like a bit of a misconception there. It's like you don't need all these fancy flight hours. Yes, definitely go get 200 series times. That's a huge recommendation right there, because it's just gets you familiar with, yes, you might have flown a Cessna 172 or 182, but the 200 series aircraft, piston-wise, they've got 300 horsepower engines. They're a lot different, they're a different feel, and operators like to see that. And I guess another thing as well that I would say is a misconception is that, the big scary world, up here, like the operators, they'll just like kind of look at your resume and laugh at you. Most of them up here, if you ask for the chief pilot will come out and have a sit down with you and talk about, look through your resume and actually give you the time of day. So it won't be the instant rejection. But no, that's probably another thing as well I found along the way. I tried, I reckon, maybe 15 operators in my time when I was up here before I landed my first gig. But yeah, most of them will give you the time of day to sit down, and they'll give you tips and feedback, which I found really helpful along the way as well. But I guess another thing that I love about it up here is it's like, I'm very fortunate. The company I work for, the owner and managing director and the chief pilot, they're phenomenal. It's such a good culture up here. Like, I love it. Like last night, for example, we went around to the hangar and we had Friday afternoon beers and snacks, with our head of engineering, the owner, the chief pilot. It's very that's what I love about it. It's very social as well, and that's another thing that keeps you up here. And then it's just, it's like the I guess it's the love for it, and it's just so different. And yes, the town might be very small and there might not be a whole lot going on. Like, there's a whole lot of pubs and clubs and stuff like that. But it's just, I guess the company keeps you there. And like, I love my job. It's so cool.
Yeah, and that's, I suppose, the most important thing is that if you remain resilient and you just want to, and you have that overall drive of wanting to get something, you will eventually find something. I suppose that's the main thing you take away. Is that like, sure, like, you can, sure, it's ideal to get something in the first few goes, but at the end of the day, if you keep on going, you get, and you keep your heart at it, and this is something you want to do.
It's definitely like that. But it's just like in terms of like where I think it's going as well, in terms of recruitment from companies, it can go, I think, either one of two ways. So in terms of the Kimberley, like, I can't speak for what's going to happen in Darwin and those scenic places, but just talking to people and within the company, we think it will be the biggest dry season we've had next year, because there'll be a lot of pent-up travel that wants to happen domestically, and since they think international borders will still be closed, so we think we'll have a very big dry season next year, which again means they'll need pilots.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Don't write it off completely. Oh, they'll use other guys, as I think Stu was mentioning. It's like, yes, they will offer jobs back to people that were stood down or left because they didn't want to spend the lockdown time in Kununurra or the Kimberley region. I would still definitely come up as things change. Pilots might not want to come back up. Their circumstances might change, so there will be gaps that need to be filled, but it will be a lot more competitive than, I guess, previous years was. I think you'll have to show long-term commitment to them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it might end up being that you might have to set up shop, get a job at the local pub, and then keep going back and forwards with the company and get up here in maybe December, even way before the dry season starts. So you're that first face around town type of thing. That's the feel I get from obviously working within the company, what we think will happen.
Yeah, exactly. Just making those like those short-term commitments for that long-term gain as well. Just like you said, coming there, being willing to stay there for a while, showing a bit of loyalty there, and being a bit tenacious and whatnot, getting around there. And I think that's will ultimately pay off to you in the long run, because obviously people like that, they appreciate all the help they can get, and the more you do that, I think the more favourable they will be towards you, and I think the more beneficial they'll be towards you at the same time in the long run. I think that's one of the things that's a really good piece of advice to give all the viewers out there, or the people that are considered who are nearing the stage where they're going to have to start looking for jobs, is that you're just going to be resilient, you're going to be patient, and you're just going to be willing to put yourself out there. And it will eventually work out for you. If you, like you said, it doesn't go unnoticed. You keep on going at it, and that's, I think, what people appreciate the most. You put the time and effort into it. And like you said, it's hard work, but you will reap the benefits of that. So yeah, that's a very good point you made there, Jye. And I suppose that's one of the other things you can go into, is just how this industry isn't linear like some other jobs. It's very dynamic. There are many different options, and if one option doesn't work out, there's always something else you can do. So I suppose that's obviously one of the benefits as well, is that you're not limited to doing one thing. If one thing doesn't work out, you can try something else, or you keep going at it and you'll eventually get there. And I suppose that's a good way to go to Stu from this point on, is Stu, from your wealth of experience of airline flying, you've been an instructor, you've done charter, you've flown, I think, every aircraft under the sun from what I've heard there. What would you say to those out there considering different avenues, and what were some of the benefits of what are some of the benefits, I suppose, of what you've done so far, from airline flying to instructing to GA, and what would be some of the advice that you would give the viewers out there as well? And also, before you get started as well, Brendan's had to go quickly to do a medevac, so he's had to leave us, obvious reasons. So obviously, many we appreciate him coming on as well, and obviously that takes precedence. So we all understand, but yeah. So Stu, what would your point be on that?
Yeah, really good. Another good question there, Jack. Look, so speaking as someone that has done all of those things, instructing and GA charter type stuff in the early part of my career, the answer to that is that it's all good. It doesn't matter really which route you choose to take, if indeed you've got a choice. To add to what the guys were saying before about instructing, you have to know what you're doing to tell somebody else. So it makes you a better pilot right from the start. You're just forced to sit down and think about it and what's actually happening in the aeroplane and to communicate that to the student. So that's the first thing with that. In terms of GA flying, it's all, there's nothing better than time at the controls, in command of the aeroplane, no matter what the operation is. The buck stops with you, and it's great experience, and also importantly, it's all good fun. I have no regrets from any single hour that I flew. It was, even on the shittiest night, it was still, excuse my French, it was still a fun experience, with a sense of reward. So again, it's all good, no matter what route you take. It's all good experience, and all makes you a better pilot.
Yeah, no, totally. That's the main thing here, is that there's no bad option. Whatever option you choose to go with, the main thing that I can emphasize is that irrespective of where you initially start off or what you do, you will get there. And that's the thing. It's just dependent on when you first start, to what opportunities you have available or to what your preference is. And that's the main thing. And the main piece of advice I can say, I suppose, for myself who's perhaps starting to get into this at the end of the year, is that you just got to speak to guys who who are doing things that you potentially might want to do. Just speak to people, ask for advice. You can never get too much advice, and that I suppose is the most important thing. And I suppose one thing I can ask Clem as well, being a graduate diploma, a flying alumni as well, is because you obviously have that management degree as well. What are some of the things, I suppose, that you've maybe considered when having that degree, or what are some of the things that, to those viewers as well, they can use with their flying and with their management at the same time?
Yes, that's a question that I've been wanting to ask Clem as well. Thanks to Jack for bringing it up. If you were to give yourself a tip back when you started grad dip, what advice would you give, assumingly that this message will get passed on to our audience doing our grad dips and our future students as well?
Wow, one piece of advice. That's very hard. One piece of advice I would just say is just don't give up. Yeah, primarily relates to flying, because with flying, there's just so many ups and downs, and there's going to be so many times where you feel so discouraged by your own performance, or just little setbacks here and there. And once you have those doubts, that's really, really going to step you back. In terms of management, I found that it's all about who you know and what you know. And that applies for flying as well. After graduating from the management stream, a lot of my fellow colleagues and also the students who I've graduated with found jobs straight out of the bat. And after talking with them on how they managed to secure a job, and some of these jobs were very prized jobs as well, it was all about talking to people and networking, which unfortunately it is how it is nowadays. It's all about who you know and not what you know. So when there are events and opportunities to get to know people who are in companies that you want to work for, I strongly suggest you go talk to them. Just make friends, make connections, and if you don't get the job, you don't get the job. But having those connections also allows you to further improve your knowledge of the industry, and also for the social aspect as well.
Yeah, that's I suppose one of the big things as well. Like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head getting through there. And I think, like you said, one of the main attractions of the management side is just being involved in an airline, is getting to know everyone, that social aspect, and just feeling as part of a family. I think you could speak from your time at QLink there, Clem, is that one of the many things I hear about QLink in terms of the management and everything like that is that it feels like one big family. Everyone knows each other, and it's generally a really positive and good place to work. So no, that's a very good point you've made there, Clem. Is there anything that you would like to add to that, or that you would say, not just limiting to one piece of advice, but is there anything else you'd have for the grad dip students out there as well?
Yeah, so with grad dips, most people would choose the management stream of aviation, which is what's by default. But it's not really well known that you don't have to do the management degree just to do grad dip. You can actually choose another degree, and it doesn't have to be within the uni as well, to be able to do the grad dip of flying. And the management degree in aviation may not be the most useful degree out there, because it is quite restrictive as to what you can do. So if you are willing to look for another degree, I would suggest that you, this is for those who haven't started already. Yeah, you can choose another degree and then also come and do flying. And this way, when you're in a time like this, where coronavirus is a prime example, when the whole industry kind of falls and comes to a complete halt, you do have that other backup avenue. Say you can do something in the financial industry or the engineering industry. That way you still have other avenues open when your particular sector closes down.
Yeah, no, exactly. I suppose that's obviously a good point there as well, is that coupled with that degree.
I was just going to add, I hope that's not discouraging for any people who are currently in the management stream. The management stream and the eventual jobs that you will come to obtain are actually incredibly exciting. And the short experience that I haven't seen an industry which is so fast-paced and so unique in its characteristics. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes for a very exciting career, particularly when you'll be doing this for, a good 30, 40 years.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like you said, there's anything, if you want to be in aviation, there are many benefits that exceed those. Like at the moment, with those unable to find jobs, if you do stay there, it's very dynamic. Things will change, and if you want to be there, you will have a really good time. So no, that's a very good point there, Clem. The final things that we can talk about is to get everyone's minds off the negatives at the moment. Just something that's happened in your flying career so far that you just like to enlighten the viewers on, of what you've come to learn so far.
Yeah, so there's been a few, guys. Look, there's been a few operational ones which I've had a couple of engine failures. Actually, my first night out in command of the Electra up in Europe, there were 2 engine failures. It was the same engine that failed twice on 2 subsequent sectors. That was kind of an interesting night. I wasn't expecting that on my first night out. And there was certainly a sense of achievement of that. The Electra had a flight engineer, so it was a 3-man crew, or 3-person crew, I should say. So that was one that stands out. But outside of the operational stuff, and this goes back to, I think it was Clem or Jye speaking about the management stuff and talking to people. I mentioned before that I did go to Europe after my first 8 years in the business. Now that opportunity came up from very much a chance meeting on the Esplanade in Cairns. I was flying a kite at the time, and just struck up a conversation with an American guy that was flying a Cessna Citation. And it was that meeting that took me to Europe. And I guess what I would take from that, what I get across to you guys and girls from that, is that talk to people all the time, because you never know what might come of things like that. And that was very much that chance meeting and discussion began a 7-year road of some great flying, some of the best flying of my career at that time in Europe. So yeah, always be open-minded, I think, is what I would say about that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, I suppose, to take in. Jye, do you have anything that you'd like to add on that front? Anything that you've experienced so far? Any advice or anything in general that you would like to say?
As everyone said, talk to people. Like, that's the thing that I guess people will be fortunate now. I'm sure they can talk to me. They can talk to Brendan. They can talk to Alex Gardner. They can talk to there's a lot of people that graduated this year that have gone into general aviation. But I guess, if you could give advice to someone, is you just have to be prepared to work hard and just to persevere. It's like, obviously, if you're doing flying, you love it, but then that really can be tested up here. But you just got to be committed and patient, and it will be tough. I had points where it was crap. We're going hostel to hostel from Kununurra back to bloody Catherine up to Darwin. I was running out of money. I was like, crap, how am I going to keep funding it? But those really bad low points. But you know what? I am so stoked. I love my job here. It is probably the best thing I ever do. And you have to be prepared. It's like, yeah, you will get knocked back quite a lot of times, and it'll be by chance that you do get your job. But you just have to be persistent and wait. And yes, you may fail. You might go back home after 3 or 4 months not having anything. But I guess it's that drive and that love for what we do will keep you up here. And yeah, that's all I can say is work hard and be patient, and it will come to you. That's kind of the feel from a lot of operators up here, as I've said before. If you prove to them that you want to work up here and that you'll stayed up here for a long time, still asking for a job, they will reward you. It won't go unnoticed. So yeah, that'd probably be my piece of advice there.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like you said, I think that holds strong with what I think the main theme of today. You just got to stick it out. You got to go through some times of uncertainty, and sometimes you will question yourself as to why you're doing this, or as to why you're doing that. But you have to remember the main reason as to why you got into it, and that's flying, and that's the experience that comes with flying, and the dynamic nature of it.
Yeah. And it's just like, even though it's like, yes, you're living through this crisis at the moment, and it's like the business has taken a hit on working for, everyone's still as positive as the day was there. And yeah, it's not a bad place to be staying at isolation when you got heaps of rivers and gorges and lakes and outdoor exploring to do. So yeah, you can get away with a lot up here.
Yeah, no, exactly. You definitely, and like you said, you definitely go see a lot of places that, especially on your journey so far, that you would never have thought you would be at, or never thought you'd seen as well. So
I just want to target like a question towards Stuart and his take on Project Sunrise. Would that mean more jobs for in the future, or would the current pilots now at Qantas be like cross-trained or stuff like that?
Yeah. Okay. So what I can tell you about it is that the project has been indefinitely paused because of the crisis. But returning to a post-COVID world, when things do start coming back, the fleet plans, I think, that we had prior to the COVID crisis occurring had the 350 Sunrise operation as additional to any flying we're doing at the moment. Now, post-COVID, I think that might be different. Obviously, a lot of the flying is going to go, particularly the 380 type flying that we've been doing because of the nature of the economy. So I suspect it will sort of be all folded into our current operation. But again, to stress, there are a lot of variables which nobody really knows the answer to at this point. It's all going to depend on how quickly the USA and Europe recovers, and that's not looking particularly good at the moment, particularly in the US. And that all that flying, that Sunrise flying, is dependent clearly on that flying, that demand coming back, and there being a market to those destinations. So a bit hard to say, guys. I'm sorry, I can't really give you a specific answer.
Yeah, understandable. I mean, it's a massive question mark.
Absolutely. And I'll just say one final thing, guys. There is a parallel. When I qualified in 1982 as a commercial pilot, it wasn't a great time economically in Australia. No airlines had recruited for years prior to that time. There weren't a great deal of jobs around. Now, I did instructor rating, and that got me the first job fairly quickly on the East Coast. But there were a few of my course mates that either couldn't afford the rating or weren't motivated enough to do it. And a handful did just fall by the wayside. They never flew again. And I guess the point is that they probably lacked the passion for it. Within a couple of years, one of them had jobs. Qantas started recruiting about 83, 84, somewhere around there. So jobs came up in pretty big order. But some guys just didn't stick with it. And someone mentioned before, about hanging on to that passion and maintaining their age. It will come. This is a similar situation, probably slightly worse, but it will come back. And it's a matter of holding on to that passion, which we've all got, because it is a great job. I've enjoyed every day of it. But yeah, stick with it, guys. I guess it will come back, and you've got to keep the motivation there and keep interested.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to what Stu said. Because of that passion and that people in the industry have, and people already in the industry realize the great barrier of entry. And personally, I've asked for a lot of help, and I've received a lot of help as well. And because of that, I've greatly benefited from it. And I think because of that, the industry has a culture of helping and giving, and help will be given when you ask for it. So if you ever need it, just ask somebody in the industry. I'm sure they'll be willing to help and answer any questions you have.
Yeah, no, that's very Very, very well said there, Stu and Clem. The most important thing being things will return to normal. I suppose that's it for this week's episode of the podcast. Also, many, many, many thanks to all our guests today. Thanks, guys, everyone, and then especially to Jye and Brendan joining this call from all the way up north as well. And so Brendan was had to leave in the meantime, but thank you as well. And obviously Stu and Clem for coming on as well. No, it's very much appreciated, guys, and I'm sure everyone will take a lot of insight from what you've had to say, and we'll keep them motivated into the future to try and find a job. No, but thanks everyone again. Wash your hands, download the COVID Safe app, please, and to all the viewers, and we'll see you on next week's episode. Thank you, guys.